I met a traveller from an antique land, who said to vast and trunkless legs of stone, stand in the desert near them on the sand. Half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped upon those lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level stands, stretched far away. And that was Percy Shelley, well, actually it was me, reading Percy Shelley's words, reminding us that all things pass, all empires fall to dust, and ultimately the works of men are folly in the great scheme of things. You're listening to Dissecting Worlds. Hi.
You're listening to the last Dissecting Worlds.
You are. So you've got probably about an hour or so of us to put up with before we vanish off into the night, like Batman, but less cool.
Possibly more, like 90 minutes. I feel rambling.
An intermediate rambling length of time before we vanish off, like a slightly rambling. Batman doesn't ramble.
Well, he might do. That might be how he relaxes.
Maybe he just sits in the back here and talks.
That's a topic we never did. Superhero hobbies. We could have got a whole series out of that.
Isn't being Batman's hobby?
Road Trooper and origami. There you go. Discuss.
Well, we've put down a series you never got to do.
70 minutes podcasting gold there. Yeah.
So,
what else could you have? James Bond on embroidery. Off what?
I think James Bond probably did crosswords.
Oh, it's boring and middle class, so yeah,
boring
probably.
Middle class, except with a glass of scotch. Alright,
yeah.
Crosswords.
Yeah. Proud of how quickly he did the Times crossword.
Yes. Obviously the Times, very challenging cryptic crosswords.
Well, to be honest, I never understood that being a thing.
Cryptic crosswords?
Until Inside Number 9. The Inside Number 9 on cryptic crosswords was really good.
It is really good, yes. That's true. Actually.
Yeah.
Riddle of the Sphinx, I think it's called.
Yeah, in fact, Inside Number 9, full stop, is really good.
Okay, there's our first recommendation of the episode. If you haven't seen Inside Number 9, go buy the DVDs. It's excellent.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you young people watch.
It's basically two of the guys from the League of Gentlemen, and if you imagine kind of an Amicus portmanteau horror movie, but it's one episode is that kind of quirky, strange, twisted tale, and they're all different.
It's a bit like Tales of the Unexpected, but good.
Better, yes, yeah. But it can go from paranormal science fiction to just kind of a bit gruesome to all sorts of things, can't it? And actually sometimes really quite poignant.
And sometimes within the same episode.
Yeah.
It bounces around. Yeah, it's really, really good. Good. It's a rough topic already. That's the next one.
And the new series starting 2nd of January as well.
Oh, it's the 2nd of January?
Yeah. So we get our League of General Christmas specials, Christmas, and then into Inside Number 9 in the new year.
We've been showing them to Ewan.
What, League of Gentlemen or Inside Number 9?
Inside Number 9.
Oh, very good.
Yes, because the first one he saw was, and I don't really give away the ending to it, but it's the 1970s horror movie one.
The Krampus one?
The Krampus one.
Ooh.
Yeah, his face was priceless.
I was going to say the ending of that.
Yes, quite dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. We hadn't seen it either, so we were a bit like, okay.
We'll file that under responsible parenting.
Yes, but just an example of the show, they got in one of the old Doctor Who directors to direct the episode. Yeah. So it's got this wonderfully authentic feel of like what 1970s British TV drama looks like. Mm-hmm. Like the camera grain is right, the sets are right, and the kind of where they've set the camera up and how they've blocked the characters moving around and stuff. So it feels very kind of like familiar to anyone who's watched a lot of 70s British TV.
Yeah.
And then they go and do something else or something more interesting with it. So
yeah. And I think what's the Sheridan Smith one called? Because you're really good at remembering episode titles.
Yes, 12 Days of Christine.
Yeah, which is like that was a Christmas one, wasn't it? But it's kind of got time travel almost feel to it. But very, very good stuff. Anyway, we've wandered off topic already.
We have. We're doing well. So anyway, as intimated, I think we probably better not bury the lead. This is going to be our last episode after many years.
7
years, and not quite 100 episodes.
No.
Sadly, we're going to call a day to the show. I think the reasons for it are relatively straightforward, as anyone who's been looking at how frequently we put an episode out through 2017 can probably work out. It's just that it's just been increasingly difficult to get together and do it. Because, we've got families and jobs and all that kind of exciting grown-up shit.
Yeah, and not just little families. The other side of things, people getting old and dying.
Yeah, I don't mean like
so it's
kids, I mean,
so it's the whole portmanteau.
Yes, for various reasons, I had quite a rough 2016 with family, and you've had quite a rough 2017 with family. So between those 2 years, it's kind of drained us a bit, I think.
Yeah, and there's also, I mean, let's not just say it's a negative. There's also a positive there. I personally, I've got much more back into my role-playing games, and there's only so much spare time, and it's been like, well, if I gave up Dissecting Worlds, would I have more time to do the role-playing? And would we, for instance, be able to do a successful weekly game? And the answer appears to be, yes, we would. So that's kind of a decision as to where to put those efforts. And in the summer, I really enjoyed helping my daughter when she started doing her cricket lessons in the summer, and I thought, well, I really want to, before I'm too old, have a go, because I don't know if anybody listening knows, but I quite like cricket.
I have noticed that.
So it was like...
Even as we record in the middle of the Ashes series.
Oh, painful. But yes. Yes. Yeah. Even in the context of that, I want to have a go at that. But again, it's balancing things, and you need to have that little bit of extra headroom. And it's not so much the recording, but the editing takes a ton of time, which admittedly you mainly shoulder that burden. But also, like, when you're kind of mapping out your reading, mapping out your watching and stuff, which I don't feel I've quite done justice to for the show. In recent years,
I must admit, not having to read stuff.
Yeah, not having homework.
Yes, we made this decision a couple of months back, and we put out the fact that it's taken us a couple of months to get together to record this, kind of reinforces that difficulty that we've had. But yeah, not having a reading list of stuff I've got to read. And don't get me wrong, I've read some great stuff for the show, and watched some great stuff for the show that I've really enjoyed. And the stuff that I'm reading now, I'd love to have covered. I think I can easily put out a list of things that I'm not going to get to talk about, and, well, except to Zoe, probably, whether she likes it or not.
Well, it's Twitter, isn't it? There's Twitter and Facebook, isn't it?
Exactly. And stuff I'm maybe not going to talk about, which is a shame, because I've just got into The Expanse, for example.
Yeah.
We talked about doing a show on Westworld. We talked about...
I never got into Westworld. I never got into Expanse. Westworld was painfully slow for me.
Yeah, but Stranger Things.
But like, I would have loved... Yes, Stranger Things. I would have loved to have covered The Purge. I haven't seen the last one in the trilogy yet. I really find that an effective, an interesting setup.
Having just watched the last Planet of the Apes film last night, anyone follows me on Twitter, I probably talked about nothing else. Over on social media, we never really covered that franchise. We talked about the old Apes films a bit.
Yeah.
But now they've capped off that trilogy, that would have been an interesting revisit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice to have done another drive-by on the big superhero universes that are flooding cinemas seemingly every couple of weeks.
Would have been nice to do a good run at Saga, actually.
Yes, it would have been nice to do.
Now that Saga's had some time to kind of bed in. And not just be like the new, shiny. And it would have been, and Rat Queens would have been an interesting one to cover as well.
I haven't read Rat Queens, I must admit.
Well, it's because it plays so heavily on F20 tropes.
Oh, I see, right, okay.
I think it would have been F20 being like your kind of D&D clone role-playing game.
I might go and read it now.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting from that perspective. They're murder hobos. That's the long and the short of it.
And they're kind of explicitly so, I presume, rather than...
Yeah.
Yeah, or, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that kind of reimagining of those traditional fantasy tropes going on. So I read Gail Simone's Red Sonja run, which does a lot of that kind of stuff. It's very kind of joyous and high adventure and swashbuckling, but still very modern in a lot of ways of how it handles its characters. So that's probably a similar kind of.
Depending on I hear amazing things about Wonder Woman and Conan.
I haven't read that.
No, neither have I. But it's actually, I very rarely get trades these days, but it's on the list because I hear people whose views I respect, both Conan and Wonder Woman, saying very good things about it. So it's like,
Yes, there's clearly infinite stuff we could have kept doing.
Well, especially with streaming services, because you're watching. I mean, I think you're much further ahead than me, but you've got stuff like The Good Life, Good Place, even.
The Good Life may also be related to The Good Place. I don't know.
Well, actually, you could probably have done a whole series because we did Survivors, didn't we? I think back in the past.
Yes.
But you could have.
It's actually kind of related to in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah. It's all part of the self-sufficiency movement. Season 2 of The Survivors and The Good Life, for anybody who doesn't know, was a 1970s sitcom where a guy who worked in advertising gave it all up and basically mowed up his lawn and is growing his own potatoes and stuff, and they're trying to be self-sufficient. Whereas next door to them is still his old colleague and his frightfully upper-middle-class, painfully snobbish wife, played by the delectable Penelope Keith, who are still their bezies. And there's a bit of a flirtatious relationship between the two couples as well.
Very 70s, yes.
Very 70s. Yeah. But you've got this whole vibe that, you know, the posh couple, or if inverted commas, are like looking down on the guys who are trying to be self-sufficient. It's quite I haven't watched it recently, so I imagine there is probably some stuff in it which is problematic.
It's quite class conscious as well, isn't it?
Yeah, but I seem to remember it being very warm-hearted. And actually, Tom can be a bit of a knobhead sometimes as well. He can be a sulky little bastard. Tom, who's the one who goes self.
Yeah, because there's a piety, there's a kind of Guardian reading piety to it, isn't there?
Yeah. And he wants it to be right, and he wants it to do properly. And sometimes where they have to make compromises, like sell some of their vegetables to be able to, I don't know, get a fuse so that they don't freeze in the winter or whatever. It kind of. So, but that kind of, the point is, it kind of parallels The Survivors. And probably quite a lot of other stuff that was happening in 70s science fiction and around the time. You've got, is it Ultimate Warrior with Yul Brynner? Where you've got like gardens in the rooftops of derelict Manhattan brownstones.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think something like that. And it's something like you've got these different rival communities, and Yul Brynner's got to kind of get out to get an antidote and come back in. But you've got like these communities trying to subsist off these gardens that they're growing on the rooftops of their brownstone fortresses.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think if there's anything we've done well over the years,
if there is anything,
we've done well, I think going back to some of those historical eras and trying to re-examine some of that historical culture, like that legacy media culture stuff, I think is like, for me, been continually interesting.
It's really. I mean, we've mentioned Inside Under 9, or Number 9 already, but I watched the League of Gentlemen Christmas special last night. Yeah. Which is quite a few years ago. I think it's like 12 years ago or something now. But watching the treatment of Barbara, the transsexual taxi driver.
Yeah.
And also her lip, the kind of predatory, homosexual, straight, is he a paedophile, kind of German tutor in it. That kind of setup. You're looking at those gags and you're thinking, like, would you do that now?
It's not that long ago either, really, is it?
It's really, well, that's my point. It's like, it's a decade. It's a decade. It'll be really interesting to see where they go with that, because obviously they're doing for the 25th anniversary of the radio show, they're doing 3 new episodes this Christmas.
Yeah, so are they going to be able to do that, and then...
Yeah.
And the writers, I mean, the writers always come across as very switched on. So
yeah. But it's very interesting. Like, I mean, I think Papa Lazaro is a character who's in blackface, but really he's a grotesque. There's no kind of racial element to that character, I don't think. But that, I think that kind of goes by the by. But just watching it, because Bob, I think also I watched an old episode of season 1 with Barbara in it as well, and it was just like, would you do that now? Would you be getting those laughs now on a BBC Two sitcom?
I suspect that you wouldn't even try these days.
Yeah.
It's not worth the risk of getting.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It's interesting because, like you say, it's not that long ago.
No, it isn't. And like I said, we've looked at stuff from like the 19th century, where there's problematic doesn't cut it. I think is probably a fair way of saying it.
Yeah.
But also the fact that when it does reflect, and that we've tried to consider, and I think isn't always considered when you see critics writing these days, is that like these tropes roll forward, these tropes survive, right? They're just not as explicit, and it's quite easy for filmmakers and people to get tripped up by going, hey, one to that was quite cool. I like that trope. I'll rip that off. And I'll use it. And you're like, yeah, but just because you've got a bunch of white actors playing this character doesn't mean it's not a screamingly racist trope.
Well, can I just? This is another thing. Is Tarzan? Tarzan, the Netflix cartoon, based in Africa. There's African people around and all the rest of it. Okay, but one of the ideas that we never did was a series on children's television, and the Disney Tarzan, and also a lot of other African stuff like Finger Tales, which I love, but a lot of other African set children's entertainments just cut out people.
How do you mean?
Well, they just don't have people in, do they? It's just all animals.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Because it's a bit problematic, because if you kind of show people in a say in the Tarzan sense, because Tarzan's set in the 1880s, the Disney one, which doesn't fit in with the books, but never mind. But if they'd shown like indigenous African people in that context, they probably would have got some hassle for showing people in a primitive or stereotypical sense. So, right, they kind of dodged that bullet, okay. But then, so you see what I mean? So what people, going back to what you were saying, they kind of use these tropes, but then they go like, well, we don't really want people. So what you actually end up is with like less representation of people of colour, because it's a bit hard, isn't it? It's a bit hard, yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's a bit hard.
I think the story often falls, it's like, well, we've either got to just come out with a solution to not touch these stories at all, or just every week we're going to have to go, look, imperialism is shit, guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Kipling is problematical, but Tinker Tales, like, to some extent, Tinker Tales is kind of parallel to Just So stories, because they're all kind of origin. For anybody who doesn't know, Tinker Tales are all things like how the elephant got on Trump Court.
No, it's basically Kipling's Just So stories.
Yeah, it's similar, but I think a lot of it's actually based on African folklore. But for example, if you read Just So stories, in the How the Leopard Got Its Spots, the leopard's hunting partner is actually an Ethiopian, and it's all interrelated how they got to their condition. Is trying to hunt animals in the forest.
Yeah.
Now, there's some appalling language that comes in at the end, mainly, of that Just So. So, I think mainly in the poem, actually, that rounds out the chapter, if I remember correctly. But but you see what I mean? So yeah. They go in the direction where it edits out the stuff that's just a bit hard to do. And it actually results in less kind of representation.
Yeah, because it's easier just to cut it out than it is to fix it.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's true in, inverted commas, I'm sure Legends of Tomorrow is probably quite guilty of that. But, I've got soft spot for Legends of Tomorrow because it just doesn't give a fuck.
I must admit, I have a big soft box Legends tomorrow just because it appears to have decided it's just going to play a stupid historical dress-up and largely damn the consequences.
Yeah, and it's going to celebrate the fact that it's a team of fuck-ups.
And in fairness, I have a certain amount of respect for when it did an episode set in the American Civil War and just went, you know what? We've got a bunch of black characters and slavery was awful, and we're not going to shy away from that.
Yeah, but it was a bit cloying, but yeah.
It hand waves it in other periods often, but at the same time, for that episode, it actually kind of went, like the Old West, it kind of hand waves it away a little bit, that kind of period.
And the 40s, it hand waves it a lot.
Yeah, but at the same time, but then he did a 50s episode and it didn't.
Yeah.
But certainly to go back to the Civil War period and it just kind of looked it full in the face. And yes, you're right, it was a bit cloying and it might have been a bit heavy, but you need that occasionally.
Yeah.
I think. And it was good of the show to do that, unlike, for example, Doctor Who, which often goes back to extremely racist periods and then and sidesteps it quite a lot. And it'll be interesting to see how it manages to go back to extremely misogynist periods and dodge it in the next series.
Yes. Well, it'll be Chris Chibnall, they'll just fuck, won't it?
Well, maybe, or they'll just, or they might just hand wave it away. I mean, it's a pulp entertainment show. I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
I just.
But yeah, we'll see.
I think my issues with Chris Chibnall come back to.
Fair enough.
Yeah, when you give your actors lines like you made me come so hard I couldn't stop screaming or whatever it was in the series what I've Torchwood.
Torchwood scarred you, didn't it? That's the bottom line here.
Yes, yeah, I've been scarred by big chunks of Torchwood.
Yeah, never mind. But yeah, and I think the other interesting thing about covering a lot of historical media is the fact that people's standards change. So what could be, in theory, quite a progressive work for its time, can now sound horribly racist.
Oh yeah,
it's the Uncle Tom's Cabin problem, actually.
Yes,
it's the classic
very
example
so.
that was written and intended to be an anti-slavery, work, and very difficult to read it in that light today.
And similarly with sexism and everything else, I'm kind of becoming painfully aware that we're two stale, pale males having a conversation about racism.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we're operating in genre environments that are completely dominated by stale white guys, and as much as that is changing, and it's changed in the last, as long as we've been doing the show, in fact.
I was going to say, it's changed in the last 7 years.
Yeah,
significantly.
Significantly for the better. But it's still prevalent, and it's still too dominant a voice. But, the fact that it's changed so much in a short period of time, that can only be a good thing, right? That's new voices coming through, it's new stories being created, new perspectives. And some of that, is going to be stuff that will take some of this legacy media and take some of these franchises that are, so dominant and, come at them from different angles.
But equally, you want new stuff, don't you? I mean, like it's not from any unique background, but there's an awful lot of new stuff out there. I mean, and one of the other problems, I think, is although we've never been like a news and review show, but there's also so much content now. Because, like, if somebody said, could you do the Marvel TV universe? Well, I got a bit bored after 3 episodes of Daredevil.
I really like them, right?
Yeah, which is great.
I even liked Iron Fist, which apparently makes me worse than Hitler on some parts of the internet, so
Well, I've had my suspicions, but it's for example, from my perspective, that's an awful lot of homework.
It is. I mean, I'm finding...
to try and catch up.
I'm watching The Punisher at the moment, and I'm finding The Punisher really interesting as a way to approach what could be a very difficult character to use, given that he's all about killing people with guns.
Yeah.
To do a show that in many respects is a conversation about the consequences of violence essentially.
Yeah.
And what violent men do to each other and how they survive the experiences of that violence is quite interesting. It's quite thoughtful, or it's managing to be both kind of thoughtful and occasionally go for here's an exciting gun-related set piece, which is difficult to do.
So, did they make him an Afghanistan veteran? I take it.
Yeah, he's an Afghanistan veteran.
To update it, yeah.
Yeah, but they've surrounded the cast, and they're doing a kind of conspiracy CIA type storyline.
Yeah.
But
that was in the Garth Ennis Punisher Max.
Yes.
Or like something very similar was in the Garth Ennis Punisher Max.
Yeah, that is one of the touchstones. That's one of the touchstones for it. So apparently.
Yeah.
But also by having things like veteran support groups and PTSD, or characters with, rather than, oh, maybe Frank's got PTSD, they haven't done that, but they've had characters that explicitly are suffering from that to kind of give you that reflection and to kind of keep that in your head. That, maybe he's not, maybe he's just like, to reflect that most characters are deeply damaged. This isn't it's an interesting way to do it. Like I said, it's a very delicate line for it to cross. It's just I think it's managing it pretty well at the moment, but I haven't seen the whole series yet.
Oh, it sounds interesting how they're doing that balancing act. So do we want to park this element of discussion for now, and then maybe go into some of the feedback communications that we've had?
Okay.
For now, and then we can go back to more of a Bramblecast.
Yep, sure. Go.
Yeah. So, I've got the emails up. So, first thing I want to say we had some feedback from a listener, which I think I shall keep them confidential, but it was on our last episode, the Gore episode. He said he didn't realise Desborough was such a controversial figure, and he was frustrated that we didn't provide context for the Gore novels, but that wasn't really the subject. It was more about his interpretation, how they fit into their lifestyle, and well done to Matt for calling him out on his Gamergate stance. Despite his tactics, you were right to challenge him on that. I'll get a bit more up on that because it's easier for me to read it in another app. See, this level of professionalism, folks, this is what you're going to miss. But Matt will all make this go away with some kind of magic beans in the editing suite.
Do you think?
Or not.
Might just leave it all in. Take us as we are, listeners. It's too late now.
It's actually somebody who I chat to an awful lot on DMs on Twitter, so it'll take me a while to get there.
This is almost exciting as our look things up on Wikipedia segments.
It is. You might want to, go make yourself a cup of tea, or God, when did we record that Desborough episode?
It was a long time ago.
What, before April?
I don't know. Can't have been before April.
Hang on, let me see. No, it can't have been before April.
It was over the summer.
No, it was July.
Okay, fair enough. It was July.
See, we don't even have a track of our
July is in the summer, damn you.
Oh no, totally lost it. Fuckwits. Anyway, so anyway, thanks for the positive feedback. Yeah, I think Matt was right to challenge him. It's a little bit awkward when you have a guest on, because it's kind of like they're a guest in your house. Yeah,
I mean, Gore was always potentially going to be an awkward thing to cover.
Well, then what I think I said to some other people, it's almost like, well, let's explore it and let you talk, and then people can reach their own conclusions, whatever those conclusions are.
Yeah,
it's less about being the kind of John Humphreys, because the thing is, you don't have to score your point in 3 minutes and then cut somebody off because you've got to go to the weather. With this medium, you can just let someone talk. But with this medium, you can let somebody talk, and to whatever, I hope give them the opportunity to show themselves in their best light, and people will, draw their own conclusions if that's something that they're into or not.
Yeah,
I think it's right to kind of draw them on the problematical elements of it. And I think there was some a little bit of stuff that I did agree with him on about managing people's expectations if, say, you're running a convention game, but I think also, like, you should be frank, because I think just saying adult content doesn't really cover... My idea of adult content and yours
is different.
Will probably be different.
Yeah.
And we're quite in tune, so somebody who I don't know could go in totally different directions.
I think there's to me, I think there's two interesting things that came out of that. Well, several interesting things came out of that. Not least of which I was quite surprised to like some of the opinions. But anyway, a couple of the things that became interesting, I think, from a gaming perspective, role-playing perspective, I think the challenges of role-playing or doing any kind of game in a world which is going to be problematic for the vast majority of people is an interesting one, and how you address those challenges. So if you're running an Old West game, how racist and sexist do you make your Old West game if you're running a game set in 19th century, if you want to send a colonial game set in late 18th century Africa, how do you, and, you're going to play a Victorian steampunk game with black characters, how do you address that? That can be difficult, and what level of realism do you want to go to? That can be, that can be an interesting challenge. And I think
pick, don't you? Because, like, for example, the game I'm running at the moment is set in 17th century France.
Oh, sure. We're in a kind of pulp idiom, though, aren't we? So.
Yeah, but I think we're all quite comfortable. I don't actually know the religious background of most of the players, but I think we're all quite comfortable with, being suspicious of Huguenots, French Protestants. But I don't think anyone would be comfortable if we suddenly had somebody turn up with an African slave. That would be a slightly different thing. And obviously, in the game, one of the careers is people are bankers and they can invest in foreign commerce. And if you want to give yourself a headache, you can think about what that foreign commerce could well be.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It could be sugar plantations on Hispaniola. It could be.
Yes, almost certainly.
It might not be. It could be.
But yeah.
Well, not necessarily. It could be spices coming from the East Indies, which have their own problems. But but you choose for the sake of a playable game, because really you want to just like have intrigue, espionage, and sword fights to kind of ignore that. It may be a way you couldn't do if you were set something during like the abolition period in 18th century England, but you can choose to kind of ignore that, and it might be moral cowardice, but I think that's what we're doing.
That's true. No, I don't think it is. I think you can run a game that is about that, and you can run a game where you're saying this is a game of swashbuckling, wearing floppy hats, and stabbing people with swords, and fighting with the Cardinal's guards in the back alleys of Paris, and therefore you might want to nod towards real world social commentary or wider issues, but that's not the game people have signed up for, right? If people have signed up for that game, then totally play it. Then, that because that's the game people have signed up for. But I think because obviously when you talk, Gore's an extreme example, but when you're talking about historical periods, most of them are pretty horrendous by modern standards. I wouldn't want to live in them, and I'm a middle class white guy, right? Because for the vast majority of human history, you're either a rich noble of some description, or you're a peasant. That's it. Your life isn't worth it. But the other interesting point that I kind of thought about afterwards is that kind of like, and again, it's something we've touched on a lot and didn't quite get into that for obvious reasons, which is that self-awareness of liking things that are, again, problematic, or I hate using that word. I probably don't even like the word, to be honest. But things that where the values of the text aren't the values that you share.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an interesting thing from a critic analyst point of view. And it's an interesting thing from a commentator's kind of point of view. And it's an interesting thing from just watching and reviewing films that come out like this year, or generally, isn't it? It's like, the treatment of female characters in this film is pretty bad, but I still kind of liked it. I still enjoyed it. It doesn't mean that I'm not aware of Baby Driver, Edgar Wright movie, Baby Driver. Seen it a couple of times, took you in to see it, really enjoyed it. And even Ewan, who is not the most woke 15-year-old in the world, was like, the female characters in that were a bit shit, weren't they? You know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they really were. I still really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun film. Seen it twice. You know, but those two, that's not an irreconcilable position that the stuff that you like doesn't define you as a moral person, because you can be aware of the flaws of a piece of media and still like that piece of media. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the fact that you like something doesn't mean it stops being, inverted commas, problematic. And equally, the fact that something's problematic doesn't mean it's without worth.
And vice versa, just because you like something,
it has to be burnt into a great big bin of,
and vice versa, just because you like something doesn't mean it has to be defended to the death.
No.
You know.
No, or everyone has to read it. That's another thing. The idea that there's a canon that everyone has to read, because you do get an idea. You get people who are, you must play, or you must read.
I'm guilty of that. You see.
Yeah, you fucking are.
I totally am. Because part of my, I think on the whole, there's two. And
it's building your tribe to a certain extent,
is, and I think
isn't it?
If you look at,
not having a go at you there.
No, I think
broadly.
the point I was going to make, I think in terms of that wider geek culture, there's two kind of extremes, and one is these are ours and we own them and we don't like the normies liking it, right? Which manifests itself in all sorts of different ways, right down from the toxic to the kind of like slight, more understandable but still I think unhelpful kind of way.
I think I can understand.
And then the other side, which is
I can understand.
And I can as well, but then the other side is I tend to come from, which is I want to wave the stuff I like in people's faces and make them like it too.
Yeah,
which
but
I think is also
scale.
Yeah, I know it does. I've learned that over the years. But that's always been my instinct is that I really love this. You will love this. Read that, love it.
Guess what? I don't love it.
Bit wild-eyed, and I think that tends to be my gut instinct. And then take it personally when people don't.
No, I used to be like that with role-playing games as a teenager and into uni. Yeah.
And the other extreme of that is what leads to that kind of gatekeeping problem that you get. But it can also come from a different place. That this is my clubhouse. This is where I'm safe. And when people come into that,
I think
people come into that, they're strangers. It's like.
I'm quite sympathetic. If you were a Doctor Who fan who went through the bleak years of the 1980s watching like scrappy VHS video captures of, stills from lost episodes with captions on them, meeting in the old pub, and then like in 2005, 2006, everyone's like, yeah, I've always liked Doctor Who, me. There's a certain bit of you that's going to be, well, fuck off, where were you the last 20 years?
Yes, I know. But at the same time...
But equally, if you kind of don't go all like, well, it's not proper fucking Doctor Who, is it? Because Doctor Who has always maintained such pure ideological purity throughout every single iteration.
Consistency has been its watchword. Yes,
it has never changed. William Hartnell was always grumpy. But because of that kind of, if you let those people in, surely there's a better chance that your thing keeps on going, and you can show them the old stuff, and maybe anyway. But
I think there's that ownership impulse is human, whether you like it or not. I think, and it manifests itself, like I said, in different ways.
We like to mark our territory, don't we?
We do, and I think that the gore thing, maybe I would like that to be more opportunity to explore that, because, like I said, that manifests itself in a certain defensiveness about stuff that you like, even when you look back at it and you go, that was actually pretty terrible, or yeah, and that's that's a big part of that wider geek culture, I think. That and that because some of those things we can't shake as part of the tropes that we have and the stories that we tell, that maybe we do need to shake and we struggle to.
Yeah, I mean, we had another bit of feedback on that episode, which was like, I had to turn it off after 15 minutes because, the person concerned whose name I won't give, because they are quite well known. But then I found it so incorrigible.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Obviously, sorry to hear that, and that wasn't.
They obviously come from a very different place. So it was interesting. Our transatlantic lost nephew of a podcast almost educates. So I hope this finds you in time. Don't worry, you're in loads of time, 30th of October. So this is a bit of a lengthy one, but I think I'll do him the good courtesy to read it verbatim best I can. You'll have to imagine me with an appropriate Michigan accent. I was loading up my iPod for a marathon training a little over 5 years ago when I found a show entitled Dissecting World Series 5, Episode 2, Star Trek Captains and Captaincy. I do not know how much I can convey the hours of entertainment you two have brought me over the past 5 years. I have listened to the show, nor how much I will miss having it on my rotation. Not to say anything of having you both on my show. Not only have I loved listening to the show, but your source materials and book recommendations have found their way into my home library. I've watched more British television than I have ever imagined 5 years before because of you as well. You've helped me find some new anchor texts to help engage my more reluctant readers to get off the bench and into the world of literacy. Hell, I might even venture into the local tabletop gaming store for their Call of Cthulhu night because of you both. Can I pass on a few final recommendations? Read Martha Washington from Frank Miller. It may be the best stuff he's ever produced. Patrick, it's on the list. If you have not read, please read Jeff Smith's Bone and share it with younger folk. Finally, the Expanse series from writing team known as James S.A. Corey. Thanks for all the free entertainment. I will watch a cricket match someday, I swear.
I'm on
Patrick
book 5.
From Almost Educational.
I'm on book 5 of The Expanse, Patrick.
Right, so you're well ahead of it. Well, you can lend them to me. Did you buy them?
Yeah, I've got them on Kindle though. The TV series, I think it's got about halfway through book 2. So I'm so spoiled on the TV series, it's ridiculous.
That's quite good though, because I think I think I might prefer it in book form. It might be just the actors or some production values didn't take to me on the TV show.
I find that the books are really interesting, and the books are interesting as much as they're moving their story forward at such a pace. By the time you get to kind of book 4, they're telling almost a different type of story. And that's quite interesting. I'd be interested to see if they can keep that trajectory up, because part of what attracted me to the first couple of books and the TV series, the universe kind of isn't there anymore. So how they still kind of keep those touchstones that made those stories work while their universe has moved forward is an interesting question. I don't want to say too much because of spoilers, because it's a TV series as well, which is well known. But I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the TV series. I don't think I've been that engaged in a new fictional universe for a long time, in fairness. And I've been getting pretty jaded on science fiction, partly because I've been reading it for so long. I think one of the things that drives that kind of cynicism often about media, and why people keep going back to original franchises, is that sense that, like, you can't have your first kiss again, right? You can't lose your virginity twice. So that
well, technically, Matt, you kind of can.
Okay, fine. Well, okay. I feel distracted now. Slightly disturbed. Anyway.
Different,
Yes, okay, fine. Technically you can. Right. There's a finite number of times you can lose your virginity.
Yes. You can only lose your virginity in so many different ways.
Yeah, okay, fine.
I think would be
right. But what I mean is, and I think there's an excitement to discovering a new universe, or a book, or a movie that lights you up in a way that you haven't had before, right? And we all get that, and we often get that in your teens and your 20s or whatever. And you see someone just does something that's just like, wow, and you don't get that as you get older. It's difficult, and
So what you're saying is, by the time you get to the point where you're having love beads ragged out your arse in the back of a car park in
wow, I was
Cleethorpes,
really hoping we could move on from that analogy, but you know,
it all gets a bit samey.
Okay, yes. Okay, I'm going to say yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, I think the point is, I think one of the reasons that people chase back like things like the new Marvel movie, the new Star Wars movie, part of that attraction is getting those buttons pushed again. Obviously, there's diminishing returns loop to it. Yeah. But you're getting that buzz again. You know, and I understand that. I empathise.
It's the good stuff as well, isn't it? There's a certain element of that. It's the same thing with the Bond franchise as well. There's a certain there's a certain level of anticipation just in and because of what it is.
Yeah, I think I was
which is almost kind of divorced from some of the merits around it. Sometimes, to my view as a franchise skeptic.
I was talking to someone at work about Star Wars. It's always dangerous because it makes me look less like a normal functioning adult. But
I'm totally out of work. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah.
And I said, I think I've got to accept that at a certain level, I can't not love a Star Wars movie. Right? It's so emotionally tied up with happy memories of various stages of my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
The music and the soundscape and the visuals are triggering emotional responses in me that are completely independent of the quality of the movie I'm watching. Right?
Well, that is the general problem with Star Wars, yeah.
Right. No, I know that's the point. Now I think I'm sufficiently dispassionate that I can talk about the new Star Wars movies without just turning into a dribbling wreck, but at the same time I have to fight against that, because if you just put a camera with an X-wing flying past the screen going whoosh, pew pew, right, a little part of my brain just flips over and dies. Right? It's just like that's all I want. Right? You know, and it makes it very difficult. To kind of dispassionately analyse it, and it's why you get quite strong reactions, and people go, oh well, I don't think much of that. Wow, could you say that? You know, and vice versa. You know, that people are going to see a Star Wars movie and expect that buzz again, intensity, and they might not get it. They're not going to get it. You're not going to get it in quite the same way, because you're never going to be, 8 years old sat in a cinema watching that for the first time.
But it winds me up. I think I will have said this multiple times over the last 7 years, but the pregnant weight of these things and how they squat. So you say, if somebody was to ask, you say, well, I like science fiction. Oh, I like Star Wars or Star Trek. Well, you see, okay, or, oh yeah, a role play. Yeah. Oh, like D&D. Well, I haven't really played that since I was 17, but, it's so reductionist. But what are you going to do?
It is, but then again, the opposite view is, like, I sat in, science fiction conventions in the 90s and argued whether Star Wars was science fiction at all.
Well, I think there's a case for that, but it may be on the pretentious bell end side of things.
It is,
there is a case.
It's another kind of like really reductionist. Like, we've got to have this in its actual bucket, and it's the opposite to that. Where it's not really science fiction, is it at all? It's third wave science fantasy redux next gen thing. It's like rock music. It's like music fans when they start sticking genres in every single band. It just does my head in. Let people like stuff.
Yeah, I think so. But it does like it. It can just be kind of irritating. But it's kind of everything boils down. But that's the problem with the world, isn't it? Without getting political, but everything seems to just boil down to blur. One great squatting toad of a statement, and that kind of blind. The fact that there's no nuance annoys me. That's the problem with the world. Lack of nuance.
Well, I think
be nuanced, people. Be nuanced.
I think that's just the era we live in now, isn't it? That we live in an era of binary opinions. Things have to be great or they have to be terrible.
No, but I think it would be like, wouldn't it? All right, to stretch the analogy, and as I think we've established, I am not averse to sport. I may like one sport more than others, but I'm not adverse to sport. But it would be like if somebody said, I like football. And people went, oh, so you like Man United? Well, hang on.
That does happen to sports fans.
No. You don't assume every football fan is a Man United fan, do you?
Well, I do in London.
But you assume every science fiction fan is a Star Wars, or perhaps, a Star Wars or a Star Trek fan. Maybe Doctor Who gets a little shove-in the UK.
Are you saying just because you're not a Star Wars fan, that you're a persecuted minority?
No, but because I'm, yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. No,
this
not
is the new social media era. That's
yes.
Just thinking, it's good to see that our.
Oh yes,
it's good
yes.
to see our recording problems. Our recording problems have come back just to say goodbye.
It's interesting that we can have 5 people on a role-playing score on a Monday, and we seem to have less audio problems than we're having now.
Yes, and we're not even using video.
When we find the right medium. So I'm going to play the audio contact from Brett. So
are we going to move on from you being grumpy about Star Wars?
Yes, I think so. We've had enough of that. Right, all right, let's see if this works.
Yep.
G'day Matt, g'day Kihar. Just wanted to say to you both before you close the sociology textbooks and hang up the laser scalpel that I've very much enjoyed the past 7 years and 11 seasons of Dissecting Worlds. It's always been a fun, interesting, very thought-provoking and insightful podcast with a really cool concept looking at the social sciences of sci-fi and genre fiction that I just hadn't come across before, and you guys have executed it extremely well. I've very much enjoyed the episodes. You guys are pioneers in a way. It's really impressive, and I've very much enjoyed everything you guys have done. I thought, given this is coming up to the end, what I like to do when things are ending is go back and look at the beginning, and rewatch episodes of TV shows and read old comics so that I'm ready for the big finale. And I had to do that with Dissecting Worlds as well, given that it's been a quite important part of my listening over the last few years. And I've identified a few themes that you have discussed and that have come up quite often across each of the various seasons, whether it's the military, the gender sexuality, or the empires. There's always a few little elements that we tend to get to. One of those is that there's a little bit of a divide in the way that stories are told, specifically in sci-fi and fantasy, between like a US style and a British or European style. The American style tends to be a little more optimistic, a bit more about going out to the frontier and seizing what's yours and pushing back the boundaries of what's unknown. That's the US sort of style there. It's that pulpy, optimistic, action-oriented sort of sci-fi, whereas the British and European model tends to be a little more cynical, tends to focus more on a character who is somewhat alienated from their environment. The systems tend to be a little colder and more impersonal. And whilst that can also be the case in US stories, the Rebellion versus the Empire, for example, they tend to be more optimistic, whereas the British sort of Euro styling tends to be a little more a little more cynical, perhaps, and far less optimistic, especially with endings and things like that. Maybe it's the influence of Sartre's idea of ennui and that whole sort of movement, the existentialists. Sorry, that's just come off the top of my head. Feel free to take this bit out because I am talking out of my posterior. Another big theme has been just how much you guys like The Wire. There are lots and lots of mentions of the show. And hey, season 1 was a prize there for a while in your logo competition. So that's been funny. And yeah, it is a fantastic show. I think it's been one of the better shows on TV over the last few years. Although there's been much, much more coming through lately. So I'd be interested actually in hearing what you're currently enjoying in terms of the genre TV. The other thing that you've noted quite a few times is that there's a really interesting space that can be carved out by a clever writer, looking at what is happening with the common people or the regular folk in these big epic universes and these huge sweeping stories. For dramatic reasons, of course, the current stories tend to focus on, historically stories are focused on the huge quests and say the heroes saving the world, be it from Doctor Doom's malevolence or the Celestials coming down, taking the ring to Mordor or defeating the evil empire. But there is very much a space there for someone to dig down a little deeper and look at, hey, what would it be like to be a weaponsmith in Tolkien's universe? Say a dwarf over the centuries and how the changing political landscapes and the evil of Sauron, Saruman would affect his work. Or, just looking at, hey, what is it like to be a merchant trying to deal with the Empire, the Star Wars one? Or, hey, what if you're a young upstart company that wants to try to take on the might of Weyland-Yutani or OCP or something like that? So you've carved out a little space there that I think someone could step into and have a look at. Hey, just had another thought. Maybe that's what role-playing games are all about. You get to be that individual who is involved in the big epic action, but also gets to interact with the NPCs of the universe. So yeah, I guess you've noticed that there can be more work done on the NPCs in the various universes. Once again, guys, thank you very much for a podcast that I've enjoyed immensely and has become an important part of my life over the last 7 years. I look forward to seeing what it is you're going to be doing in the future. I wish you the best of luck with new endeavours that you become involved in. And I just want to finish off by saying here's to Dissecting Worlds, and here's to you, Matt and Kihar. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, Brett. Did you get that all right, Matt?
I did. That was very sweet.
Yeah, I think thank you, Brett. And as I anticipate, by about 6 o'clock this morning, well done on going ahead in the Ashes. And hopefully I can remember everything. It's quite late here now, but on the NPCs point, I think some shows have kind of tried to do this. I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. tried to do that. It took events that were parallel to the big events of the Rebels. Has also tried to do that kind of thing, with underlying characters in the background.
Yeah, and Rebels has kind of accelerated into the forefront a little bit, hasn't it? But it's tried to build it from that back. That kind of almost play a character level, I guess. And you just talk about it from a role-playing point of view, that's where your player characters sit in that intermediate zone between proper NPCs and the actual heroes. But I think the idea with NPCs is that your player character type characters, they become heroes. They just start out as less than heroes.
They evolve.
Yeah, sure, they evolve. They have to. Yeah, there is some behind the scenes stuff done, and I don't know if you'll get more of that. Just because
Rogue One was kind of that, wasn't it?
Yeah, and oddly enough, Spider-Man, the latest Spider-Man movie, has a little bit of that to it, in the sense that it's very low stakes.
Yes.
Given that superhero movies have got higher and higher and galaxy saving, and I appreciate Infinity War is going to be galaxy saving shenanigans, right? Yeah. But it's interesting to see that Homecoming is like a guy that wants to score a big heist so he can retire, being followed by a high school kid who wants to prove he can be a hero. It's actually quite low stakes. Nothing's really in any danger, apart from a few individuals, and that makes it feel quite refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
When everything's got big, look at Logan, standout superhero movie this year.
Yeah.
And that, again, would have been a nice thing to talk about in more depth. But Logan's very low stakes, very personal stakes. You know,
Yeah.
And again, that helps it, right? It gives it that kind of Western feel that it has, but it also means that you're not like, you know, he's not fighting at the end to save the world. He's fighting at the end to save one person and maybe himself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's a nice, you know, that feels different. It shouldn't feel different. It shouldn't feel fresh and different, but it does, you know.
Yeah, because superhero films have always gone towards the spectacle, as opposed to the drama. And it's interesting to say Deadpool, obviously in a very different direction, kind of explored different elements there.
Yeah,
and Wonder Woman, you know, although it had like the big spectacle at the end, you know, had a lot more personal drama
which for
in
me
it.
is the weakest part of the film.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, and like I really, really enjoyed Wonder Woman. I particularly enjoyed the first two acts, which felt different and felt distinctive and were more interesting and character driven and all that kind of good stuff. When it just became, hey, look, it's night again and things are on fire and there's a big CG body to punch. I was like, I've seen this film 20 times, right? And that's not a stupid DC versus Marvel comic. I've seen this, you know, argument, which is the second most pointless debate in geekdom after Star Wars versus Star Trek, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
maybe.
But I have
But
seen
DC is better. But anyway, go.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, in comics,
the comics nerd in me totally agrees. The film nerd in me is like Marvel.
Films Marvel have got are a machine. But
they're a machine. Yeah, machine is a good thing. They're a machine. They're going to put out. You know what you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
And there's an element of reliably solid quality to that.
They're universe.
You know, I don't know. I don't know what DC are going to do. DC probably have a better chance of putting out like a absolute A-rated classic, I would say.
Studios before. The life I'm quite enjoying that, not the good life. Again. The Good Place. I'm quite enjoying that. I'm about 5 episodes in. I'm enjoying it.
I'm enjoying it.
Very good.
I've seen everything they've done so far. I've hugely enjoyed it. Probably can't talk too much about it, given that it's got an ongoing story.
I understand there's quite a few oohs and ahs. I think it's a little annoying that none of the indents figure the ethics professor, considering how much of a focal point of the plot he is. There's a lot of Ted Danson.
He's great in it, though.
Yeah. Unlike the rest of the world, I've enjoyed Series 9 of Curb Your Enthusiasm, but that's mainly because Larry David reminds me of my daughter.
That's just a little bit weird, but there you go.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't. I haven't seen Star Trek Discovery, so I can't really comment on it.
I've enjoyed Star Trek Discovery. Like everything else, it's still working out what it is. And again, part of me is like, when did we forget that most TV shows take 6 or 7 episodes to work out what they are? Right? You know, I don't
think Breaking Bad knew what it was for about 3 seasons, did it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some shows, I admit, right? And I like if you
The Wire.
Yeah, but if you look at look at Westworld, right? You can watch the pilot of Westworld, and I'm pretty sure that will tell you whether you're going to like the rest of the series or not. Right? If you watch the pilot of Westworld and go, "This is slow-paced wank," right? It's not.
I didn't think now.
It's not going to change its the next 10 episodes. In some respects, it's an ideal pilot, right? It's going to lay out everything it's going to do in the next 10 episodes. It's not going to tell you the story, but you're going to get the feel of everything that it pretty much goes on to do and what it's going to talk about, right? And so if that appeals to you from watching that first episode, by episode 10 you'll be like, yeah, fine. But most shows don't do that. Most shows you watch the pilot, like Discovery, there's a 2-part pilot, and it's pretty good, and then there's another 2 or 3 episodes where it's kind of trying to work out what's going on with the Discovery and what's going on with these characters. And that's obviously as they're in production, they're getting used to the actors, they're still feeling their way through it. And that's normal.
TNG was terrible, wasn't it? TNG was wooden as fuck for a couple of seasons.
Exactly. That's normal to me. It's normal to me that like a show takes that length of time. Now I know we're in the streaming world where you might only get 13 episodes. You probably don't have 2 seasons to work that out. But that just feels normal to me. That like Discovery's taking a while to work out what it is, and it's broadly been quite entertaining, and it's quite a different look at the universe, which I quite like. It is a bit kind of more imperfect. And there's an interesting conflict in Discovery. I don't want to go too much into Discovery because I know you haven't seen it. There's an interesting conflict to me that work in Discovery, which is that the crew of the Discovery and the captain of the Discovery see themselves as the future of the Federation, right? They're at war with the Klingons. We've got our experimental super ship, and we're the future, right? The spore drive is the future. How we do things is the future. I'm the type of man that the Federation needs in command. Right?
This is Jason Isaac.
This is Jason Isaac's Captain Lorca.
Well, he's a Scouser, isn't he? So he is the future.
But he's not, right? And as someone who knows the universe, he's not, right? The spore drive goes nowhere. The Discovery is largely forgotten. Lorca is not the idiomatic captain that future captains will aspire to be.
Yeah.
Because we know who those guys are.
Yeah,
They're 10 years in the future on a different ship with a different captain. And that's an interesting tension in the show. And I quite like that. And I think that's an intentional tension in the show. And when I've seen people come...
That's quite brave, isn't it?
And it is.
As kind of a setup.
I've seen people go, with the spore drive, and it's like, well, yeah, obviously it doesn't properly work in the long run. I don't think the show's pretending that it's going to properly work in the long run.
It does seem like it demands quite a high level of nerd food to kind of get the setup.
Yeah, and I think, and as like I said, I think the show's kind of gradually winding, and an attempt to do proper serialization in Star Trek, which is a genre, a type of show that's never really had it, is like, yeah, I'm enjoying it. I've enjoyed it. Some of it will depend on how it sticks the landing. So some of these things that I think are quite interesting are because they are currently ambiguous. If they resolve in interesting ways, good, but they might resolve in shit ways, and then you'll be like, I feel disappointed now.
I mean, the only other big genre of television I'm watching is the DC TV stuff, and that is pure soap opera, if I'm honest. Supergirl gets me right in the feels because of all the father stuff.
It's just popcorn.
Legends of Tomorrow is daft.
It's daft popcorn stuff. I like it.
And Flash is just ridiculous superhero antics of this week, although I do really like how they've done the Thinker. I think that is... based on the kind of reveal episode.
I'm a couple episodes behind.
Right, well, the reveal episode of The Thinker, the Thinker's backstory, I can't... You might have a different view, in which case we'll argue at a future date. Hopefully in a pub. But the reveal episode of The Thinker is and how The Thinker kind of... It's the Thinker origin story, but also like him just like facing up to Barry.
Oh, right, okay.
Is really cool. I think he's quite a compelling villain the way he's done.
But it's popcorn stuff, right? And again,
oh yeah,
you know.
But you know, to a certain extent, the way I've got them timed to come on my recording, it's kind of like they tend to be after, you know, when me and Nick have watched a daft film together, and they tend to be the things I watch after that on a Saturday night when I've had a few drinks and. Rightly or wrongly, they're my kind of no-brain telly. They're my neighbours. They're my, you know.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I think they do a brilliant job.
It's tea time. Stick it on.
Yeah. Well, different context.
Yeah.
But yeah, That's what they are, and I think they do it. I think they do it really well. I think they're well cast. They work well. I think there's still interesting stuff going in there. I think like kind of the Firestorm relationship is interesting. I don't think you'd have that relationship between, you know, a late middle-aged, almost retiree man and a young person of colour in a lot of TV shows, and it quite feels so dramatically effective.
No,
without the sci-fi bobbins, but it kind of works.
I like the Legends cast generally. I think the oddballs and misfits going through time.
I love Brandon Routh as well. I love Brandon Routh. Is just having so much fun.
Yeah,
playing
so's the guy,
guy Tony Stark.
Yeah, so's the guy playing. Is it Dominic Purcell playing Nick Rory?
What, the Flame guy?
The Flame guy. He's also. He's just clearly having a great time.
Yeah.
And I think that again that kind of helps. You've got like a slightly older cast of actor, and a couple of the castings they've been around the block a few times in terms of other shows or film careers or whatever.
Well, he was in Prison Break for years,
he was in Prison
wasn't he?
Break, so
yeah.
And so it's just like, you know what, we're gonna roll with what this is, and we're gonna have a good time, and it's gonna be and it comes across. I think it's fun.
Yeah. It would be very interesting now to watch Superman Returns, having watched Brandon Routh in a role where maybe he's got a bit more chance to breathe and stuff, because I think that must have been such a high pressure job.
What, to come out of nowhere and do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to have the contrast, and so it would be interesting to see that, because he has a really easy charm. But I Stranger Things we'd mentioned before. Yeah, I really enjoyed Stranger Things, but I don't watch that much genre. I don't watch that much television. Full stop.
Stranger Things is a really interesting way of re-engineering tropes without just doing them, which is quite. I find it really interesting that it is playing off a lot of those kind of 80s tropes. There's a lot of like nods and shout outs all the way through it, but it's not just doing it to give you the buzz of seeing that trope.
Well, it's kind of like a nerdier Fargo, isn't it?
Yes, that's quite a good analogy, actually.
You know, Fargo is a
it's full of
period
Coen
piece.
Brothers, and it's full of Coen Brothers nods.
Yeah,
Absolutely
but
stacked full of them.
and it's rooted in period, but it's also rooted in character. And Stranger Things is very, very much like that.
Yes, that's a really good analogy, actually.
You know, so because you can watch like the without giving away spoilers to the specific series, but there is one or two series of some Fargos that have more science fiction nods than others, but you could probably watch in the same space as things that get to, you know, you can see the blend.
There is definitely a moment in one of the seasons of Fargo which I can't believe they got away with.
There are two moments in fact.
Well, there's one definite one where I was like, I can't believe that not only did they do that, they actually got away with it and it works. It didn't just knock you straight out of the story, it just worked. I was like, oh my god, that's incredible. And I get the nod, I get the nod, the Coen Brothers nod that it was, which I won't mention because it's a spoiler. But at the same time, the fact that they just did it and they made it work, I was like, that's incredibly clever. And Fargo. Totally must recommend Fargo, by the way. As a final recommendation.
And I'd recommend both series of True Detective.
Yes, I would as well, actually.
Yeah, I would.
First more than the second, but there's not many flaws in the second that aren't kind of present in the first as well.
I think the problem with the second is that people expected to get more of the first, and the second is more Elroy-esque. And I was well up for that, but I could see if you were expecting it to more be, you know, two detectives uncovering for dark paths kind of thing, you would be disappointed.
I also think with the second series of True Detective that people got caught up in the first season's like Yellow King Carcosa stuff.
Oh yeah.
And that was never actually part of the plot. That was all just flavour text.
Yeah.
In the end, right?
Well, you can interpret the trippy bit in the last
Oh yeah, I get you.
episode however you want.
True,
But yeah,
but by and large, right? And then they expected maybe the second season's going to build on that, or do, and then it just didn't. And it just went off, did its own kind of multi-part, Elroy-esque.
Very. You must remember this actually as well in some parts.
Yeah, and I get why people were disappointed because it wasn't what people wanted, and I'm not going to say it wasn't flawed because it was. I think it tried to be too ambitious for itself, and that's always a problem with any show. It reached further than it could grasp, I think.
Yeah, I think it was the whole Vince Vaughn line was a challenge. But I enjoyed how it played. Enjoyed is probably the wrong word. I was satisfied with how it played out.
Yeah, I think it had some really good stuff in it, and I'm cautiously optimistic they're going to do a third series. They've had some time to think about it.
Yeah.
They've got some interesting casting, so yeah.
It's going to be in the Ozarks, isn't it? It's going to be like in the...
Yeah, it's often a totally different thing again.
Actually, that's a show we should recommend to people, Justified, because we both love that.
I'm sure we've mentioned Justified a lot. Yeah, totally watch Justified. It's finished now, the 6 seasons. I think it's on Netflix.
Yeah.
Yes, totally watch Justified. It's very cool, and if you like good-looking men in hats, it's worth it for that.
There's quite a few good-looking women in it as well.
There's many.
Their presence of hats or not are not guaranteed, but
great central performances. Just great.
It's an excuse to drink bourbon.
It is. So if we want to point as recommendations, are we kind of pretty much towards the end now? What do we think?
No, I think we got Tim's audio contactor as well, and then we got the Twitter stuff as well.
Okay, fine. So
I don't let you get off that easily.
Okay, fine. Well, do you want to do?
Yeah, I'm bringing up Tim's, and okay, which is short and to the point, but hopefully it will work with Clash of Data, or it might not. Right, here we go. Hang on. No, there's no sound coming for some reason. Hang on. He's on maximum volume. No, for some reason he's not speaking out my speakers. Awesome. Right, he just basically says, well done, I like your perspective. So you can put it in while I'm talking here.
Yes, I'll edit in. Never
I think it's quite valuable that you have this approach where you just don't enjoy it on the surface, but you dig deeper, etc. And I think the only thing to say in response to that is that we will obviously continue to do that even if we don't have a podcast, whether we do it in the pub or we do it on Twitter or we do it on Facebook. We're not
our respective long-suffering other halves.
Well, no, my long-suffering other half will say,
shut up.
A short Anglo-Saxon response if the kids are in bed, because she's not a nerd, whereas yours is. But it will be. We are always going to pick at these things. We are always going to scratch this itch.
It is, as they say,
I will be honest. I do not want to do what I've seen a lot of other podcasts do, which is where they retire and then they pop back. And I've had a little bit of anxiety about, well, do we want to let this kind of side hustle go? But for one reason or another, we've never thought about doing a Patreon or anything like that, because it's not feasible with, day jobs and things. But I just, we're always going to do this, and hopefully we're going to stay in touch with people who have reached out to us, and we'll have the facility to do that. We will continue to pick away at these things. We're going to have a little bit of think about what the future of the Facebook page is. I'm probably going to keep the Twitter page just because it's kind of defaulted to my role-playing.
I think you use it more than the other one now, don't you?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, because the other one's kind of just Tranmere and cricket.
The Tranmere and cricket podcast feed.
And the Dissecting World one's got a lot of role-playing people that I've kind of met through listening to other podcasts. So it's kind of, Yeah, so we'll still be out there. We'll still be having these conversations. So that's that. Regarding people's suggestions about things we could talk about today on... Oh my god. Right.
Sorry, go on.
On Twitter... I don't know why I said it like that.
God.
It's a musical episode. You've waited so long.
Yes, we're finally going to do the musical episode.
Right. In Overload says, what kind of cliffhanger will we leave this on? We won't leave it on a cliffhanger. We're not those kind of guys. Good old Pete Hammerson, stalwart contributor to the show, has asked Romanized Vikings or Vikingized Romans.
Oh, well, Romanized Vikings, definitely.
Well, Romanized Vikings are Bulgarian guards, aren't they? Vikingized Romans
like the Romans
would be an alternative.
Neither of them would have holes in the helmets.
Are you reading The Storm Before the Storm? Have you read The Storm Before the Storm?
I have read Before the Storm. I have, yes.
I'm about 60% through. It's great.
It is good. It is drawing some scary parallels.
Storm, like my Duncan folks. It's cool. You don't really need to draw them, but some there.
Yeah, they're just kind of there, hanging out. Going looking
You can just go
historical parallels. Sorry, that's one for the edit.
All of that. Best endings, worst endings, endings you'd fix if you could, and what shows Ian McShane shouldn't be in. I don't think there's any show Ian McShane shouldn't be in.
There's no show.
And if the answer to that is not, and if the answer to that is not, what show in most? So I think it's never in Justified. McShane Justified would have been a thing of beauty.
I can't believe they never made that happen.
But endings, like, I would have liked a third series. I would have liked at least a third series. It was rushed.
Yes, I would agree.
Did you hear?
The third series of Rome.
Yeah, so I would have liked Rome to get more of a kind of Game of Thrones. Well, not quite as padded as Game of Thrones, but I would have liked Rome to have had more room to breathe. Best endings, Blake 7.
Yes, although oddly enough, I'd be interested to have seen where they would have gone with that afterwards, given that they kind of had another series planned.
Did they really?
Apparently, they I don't know if they had it planned, but they were kind of like half expecting to get to another one. They were like big cliffhanger.
Yeah, worst endings. Worst endings to a show.
Worst endings to a show.
Babylon 5, because it had 2, and the first one was quite good.
Yes, and then they had to come back from the series.
Yeah.
Yeah,
which was shit.
I don't know, because I think most shows don't get proper endings, they just kind of finish. They just kind of stop, don't they? So
I think Buffy could have done.
I think
if Buffy had finished when she died.
Buffy had a perfect ending, which is when she died.
Yeah.
And that's a shame in some respects, because I've seen some defenses.
Not that there weren't really good episodes afterwards, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that would have been like an absolutely spot on ending for it, and if they'd wanted to keep it going, they should have used a different lead character. Maybe in the modern era, that's what they would have done.
Yeah.
Because Angel has a great ending from a show. Going back to shows.
It
took about 3 seasons to work out what they wanted to do. Angel went on to have a really good last couple of seasons, especially this last season.
Yeah, but it's just them going out against the apocalypse, isn't it?
But also just to have a season just to wrap everything up and go, right, that's how we're gonna go out. I can't think of any really bad endings. Because most of the ones that people bitch about, I quite liked. I quite liked the ending of Lost, and I really liked the ending of Galactica. So
Yeah, I like the ending of Galactica.
I have a big soft spot for Galactica's
Galactica's
last weird, dying slowly in the cold of space. You know, do we have the right to exist type last season? I like that. You see, I really like that feel. And
You're
so,
miserable, Vulgar.
no, but I liked it. It wasn't the being chased by killer robots and having adventures stuff that the earlier, infected the earlier series. And again, Lost was always about the characters, so having a character-focused ending rather than a plot-focused ending. You know, I understand why people that were attracted to Lost for its plot were disappointed when it turned out it didn't really have one. But what attracted me to Lost was its character work, so that kind of worked for me.
So, have you got any show you think desperately needs Ian McShane?
Everything, all shows need Ian McShane.
Ian McShane and Blake Seven. Ian McShane and Blake Seven would have been interesting. Because I've seen Magnums from around that time. And I think he would have been quite. If I'm wrong, Ian McShane on me, but.
Yeah.
So
Ian McShane. Sorry, Dan?
If you do over one series, and I think they mean one series of Dissecting Woods, which would it be, or are they all gold?
Are you going to say alternate histories, though?
No, because I know some listeners found it a bit homeworky, but I've always thought we had a Reefian duty to educate as well as entertain. So I'm quite kind of proud because I think the after that series, I won't get more about history from your World War episode that I did from 5 years in secondary school. I think it's what is born again. I got feedback and it was very good, and I should have done some more reading around Frank Miller's work before we did the Miller versus Moore episode. I think maybe, but other than that, I had one in the tip of my tongue and it's gone. But I think any one series, there's always room for improvement, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there's more odd episodes. I think and maybe didn't quite get there, or I feel like we didn't do justice to the subject. And that's kind of always why we tried to do conclusion episodes so we could go back to them.
Yeah.
And when people told us off, it was usually because we hadn't done something right. So we've always been blessed with reasonable feedback, and that's always been good.
Yeah, and I think being told off is really good. I think there's when people end at the end of a podcast and say, give us feedback. Everyone thinks people want, a tongue up their bum. Well, no, they don't. They kind of want a point, because it's a weird thing to talk into the void. And unless your listenership or also your friendship group, which would be kind of a bit weird with kind of the internet and everything else.
You can just talk to your friendship group. You can just bore them down the pub.
Well, you kind of can, but then, life and things, that's not quite as easy as it always has been.
Yes.
But I bet you're all sitting there looking at your phones potentially. But it's an interesting setup, but feedback's a really useful thing. And I would say this: if you listen to any other feedbacks, if you listen to any other podcast, and you are, or any other vloggers or YouTubers or anything else, by all means, let them know they're doing a nice job or give them a like. That's lovely. but also engage with them, because I think that is a tremendously positive thing for them to know that they're not just speaking out in the void, and to help them improve their offering to you, and also kind of give them a fresh perspective. It's a bit deep, but
No, I think that's true, and it's like, yeah, and spread the word for people. That is always appreciated.
Yeah.
You know, shares and retweets and whatever. That's always
iTunes reviews. I mean, that is what's. I mean,
and maybe we've been a bit rubbish at that historically, but you know, it's always appreciated. And obviously,
well, no, we took a that we would which was incredibly valuable in terms of increasing profile. That's up to Barry for all the support he's given us with the show over the years. And he's my podcasting dad. Even though he's only a couple of years younger than me, and that does raise whole kind and he's about 8 shorter than me, and there's a visible difference between us. But he's my podcasting dad, and he's a stalwart guy. He's given us so much help over the years with all kinds of different stuff. But it does mean we haven't really carved out our own identity. But you do it.
Yeah, well, I don't know much to add to that.
You go about that.
Whoa, hang on. So, say that again.
And he's still going strong. He's been going for a very long.
That's true.
I was just saying, but we did have a minor retirement. So, I think that's it on the. Let me just check anything else on the old Twitter feed. Or some people have said they thought we were going forever. I'm not immortal. Pretty sure Matt's not immortal. So
I don't feel very immortal.
You're a bit worn out at the moment, aren't you?
I'm a bit worn out at the moment. It's trying to. Yeah. It's just everything.
So that's that as far as like feedback. So is there any other major pointers we want to say to, or things we want to say to people, like go out and try, or
I definitely want to say that. Honestly, I would
go out and try.
Yeah, totally say that. Listen, I've really enjoyed doing this.
Since Kihar bullied me into this.
No, I genuinely really enjoyed doing this show, and I've met people, and I've talked to people, and I've done things I would never have thought I'd have the opportunity to do.
In that car park in Cleveland.
And other things as well. And it's just the fact that it's been motivational for me to do it, and I've met people that have encouraged me to do things, and just putting yourself out there, right? And I know people I've worked with have Googled me and come across this show, and that's been weird, right?
Well, that's because you use your real name.
Still listening, hi. But it's made me maybe less embarrassed about these kind of fandoms that I have, and it seems weird that I would be, but you do get that, and it's like, well, no, actually, I'm an enormous nerd, and I do a podcast, and 5 people and their dog listen to it, and but at the same time, it's like I think we have probably said 2 or 3 intelligent things in the last 7 years. And
maybe 2.
And if we have made a difference to anybody, if any one person has gone out, right, and read a book they wouldn't read, or watched something they didn't read, or started their own podcast because they've heard us rattling on and thought I can do better than that, right, then that's it. That's mission accomplished, right? That's what it's all about. And if you're thinking of doing this, and you're listening and thinking of doing this, that's the same thing. If you're listening to this and thinking, I should give that a go, give it a go, because there might be somebody else that will be inspired by you giving it a go to give it a go themselves. And we're all just adding, like, to this conversation, and that has value, even if it's a small value.
I would say, I might say it slightly more succinctly, but would be just JFDI. Which is,
well, if you're going to be to the point.
Well, yeah. So if you're thinking about doing it, just fucking do it.
Yeah, that too.
You don't need sound quality is an enormous barrier, as I think we've demonstrated. Just get on with it. And and if you do, drop us a line. The email box will still be open even at dissectingworlds at yahoo.co.uk.
I do like after all these years you still struggle with the email address. That's
listen
pretty
to
cool.
I struggle with a lot of things. Well, I normally get my wife to say that's cheating. But we would definitely give it a listen because we are that's more. And look now, I'm just like, if you are short of things to listen to, here's our Desert Island 5 podcast. I want to consider.
Can I get to 5?
You.
Do I have to go first?
Listen to my podcast. No.
I think you can go first.
All right, I'll start. I'll start.
Are they all cricket related?
No, actually, I'm not sure even one is cricket related. So, opening my podcast app, because that's probably the easiest way to do it. Obviously, I assume on Desert Island, in Desert Island Discs to raid on the complete works of Shakespeare. So it's assumed you're taking the history of Rome and revolutions. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, right, my podcasts. I think, just starting from a very, right. Current affairs, stroke national security, I would recommend Bombshell, which is 3 female national security professionals who worked in the Obama administration. Most of them now work in think tanks, but they basically come together every 2 weeks over cocktails and dissect the latest international events. What they're really good at, because they've actually been there and worked there, is kind of saying how these things, what one of the catchphrases of the show is "process is my Valentine." So they're actually really good at kind of drilling down at how these things are falling out in the bureaucracy, or the lack of bureaucracy under the current regime in America, and the lack of posts that have been filled. And they give a real context to that kind of thing and that kind of response. They also have a bit of a popular culture background to it. So whenever they have a guest on, they ask them about their popular culture insights and the best meals. It's very relaxed and sophisticated, but insightful. So I'd recommend Bombshell. Matt, over to you for your first recommendation.
I'm going to recommend This American Life.
Ooh.
Which I really like. It's from Chicago Public Radio. It's an American podcast. It's about an hour every week, just telling stories of, people living in America, basically. It's unabashedly on the liberal side of the American political spectrum. But I really like it. It's really, really interesting, and it's really kind of, sometimes it makes you angry, sometimes it makes you warm. It's, nice magazine, current affairs show.
So my next one, going from a kind of national security itch to a nerd itch, is Hypnobobs, which is one gentleman who basically covers folklore, horror, comics, mainly 70s and 80s TV, but a lot of stuff in kind of a great detail. He's a North Country gentleman. He also does readings of horror stories and the likes as well. He will also do very kind of dissecting worlds topics like Are Mummies Zombies, which, he did 48 minutes on. But he'll also take distinct topics like he'll do the Triffids, so he'll talk about the Triffid novel in maybe one episode, he'll talk about Triffids films, and then he'll talk about spin-off media. He's done a natural history of the Batman, which I think went on for 10 episodes. He's currently up to 10 episodes on Zombie, where he's really gone back to like the earliest zombie tales through the 1930s movies and stuff. It's a wonderful potpourri of obscure folklore. He covers like paperback novels from the, not paperback novels, but like, do you remember stuff like the Hamlin Book of Horror or the Osborne Book of Mysteries as a kid of the 70s? Yeah. He does whole episodes on stuff like that. So, and also like obviously tributes to the great and good when they pass on. It's a wonderful smorgasbord of geekness, all told in a very avuncular kind of fireside way. You feel like you're sat with him as he's sat in a high back leather armchair with maybe a stiff drink next to him. He also does film commentaries as well, which he'll kind of time you in so you can line up your DVD or your recording and watch the film alongside with it. You're sat there while he's having some buttered rum or some buttered eggs or both, while he's regaling you with these tales, and it's a real passionate little project that I would strongly recommend. You might not listen to every episode. You might say, well, maybe that's not for me. But I mean, do you remember when I run the space opera game with Jeff the Mongoose and the Revolt of Santa's Elves? Yes. Both the Jeff the Mongoose story and the whole Steve Austin 6 Million Man Revolt of Santa's Elves plotline were from separate episodes of Hypnogoria. Uh-huh. So he covers all the genres. Over to you, Matt.
I will go for You Must Remember This, which is a...
Oh, that saves me mentioning it.
That's good. That is it's a history of 20th century Hollywood. It's brilliant.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful is what it is.
Yeah, it's really well done. It's in a series of discrete series. You could just jump into a specific series and look at it. They've just done one on Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, comparing and contrasting their lives. I think the standout one for me,
Charles Manson?
It's the Charles Manson one, which is just absolutely top notch.
Yeah.
But the other one's is quite good. The Star Wars one is good as well, which is about stars at war, not Star Wars.
Stars in the 1940s. Yeah.
Yeah, stars in the 40s. That one's really good, and the McCarthy era one is very good as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the recent more bio ones I like as well, but the McCarthy one is worth listening to. And the Manson family one is the best thing that she's done.
It's
outstandingly good.
You think Manson family and just think, but it's actually, not only does it go through the whole timeline of
how it weaves in and out of Hollywood, and how much weight it puts on the victims, which is oddly quite rare in true crime.
Yeah, and also and all everything that was going on there, and so the next one I shall mention is Talk Without Rhythm, which is a film podcast. We had El Goro on when we talked about John Carpenter.
Nice.
When we failed to record it the first time. El Goro is, I think he's only 34, but, he's much like Barry. He is, and somebody else I'll talk about later, he's an inspiration to me in his sort of clarity and his self-reflection. He's a relatively young lad. He's bringing out episodes every week. In Halloween, he actually brings out an episode every day on top of his normal weekly time scale, just reviewing horror films that he's never seen. He's incredibly passionate about cinema. He has a very interesting collection of guests that he has on as well to help him out. He's also a role player. I actually asked him a role-playing question that went on one of his more recent episodes that he came back to quite fulsomely with some points in advance. He knows his cinema and he knows his shit. And to sort of tie it into the whole Charles Manson point before, if you listen to him on Rosemary's Baby, he is very clear on where he lies on the difference between an artist and art. I'm very clear on where he lies on the where he views the morality of Roman Polanski. But he applies that same kind of vigour to any question he comes to. And he is well worth your time as a listener. He, again, I think the pace of his production means that maybe he won't always be able to listen to every episode. But any episode you do listen to will in some way, shape or form give you a fresh perspective. So I would strongly recommend the Talk Without Rhythm film podcast. Over to you.
Oh, I thought we were doing 5 between us. I didn't realise that.
No, five each.
Oh, God. I don't know if I listen to 5 podcasts regularly.
God, you should see my list. God.
Well, this is why I don't, you see.
I travel on train a lot more than you.
Yeah, that's the thing. So,
well, I could go on to my last one, he says, hopefully. And then some honourable mentions. But
okay,
yeah.
well, I'm going to chuck in... well, I'll tell you what. I'll chuck in one more, and then you can do your last one. I'm going to chuck in Welcome to Night Vale, because I know it's...
I've heard that name. I don't know what it is.
I know it kind of became very popular, and it's still going. It's a weird fiction podcast. It's half hours. It's essentially a radio show from a fictional town somewhere in reality. It's very self-consciously of the weird when you talk about the weird as a genre, right? You know, it's like Station Management's a tentacle monster, and dark figures walk in the dog park, which isn't a dog park, and alternate realities and subjective realities, and you know, it's a weird thing, and you kind of have to start at the beginning, and then you get a sense of the rhythm of it, of what he's talking about. But it's also kind of profoundly kind of warm and humanist and open, and it's its own weird, odd thing. It's slightly compulsive and slightly addictive, and I rather like it, and it's still going. So yeah, it's weird. And when people talk about weird fiction, I think you could do worse than just listening to 2 or 3 episodes of Welcome to Night Vale and going, oh, when people talk about the weird, that's what they mean.
Okay, my last one is The Grognard Files, which is a Dave the Dice and Blythe, and sometimes Ed from his shed, look at old school. Well, old school's wrong, because old school suggests a certain ideological approach. They look at old role-playing games. There are a bunch of lads a few years older than us from Bolton who fell out of role-playing kind of into the 90s, the early noughties, and have got back into it recently. And they are very, for any British listeners though, it's a bit like kind of Mark and Lard talking about role-playing games.
Okay.
So, but quite perceptively and quite with like a broader awareness. They have really good guests on. If you become a patron, they run some really good gaming conventions, which I've run at the last couple of years. And it's a very smooth, well organised, well researched, professional operation. Best enjoyed with a cup of tea and a hobnob. But yeah, it's a finger beauty. And we've had it, and of course we've had on the podcast talk about.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's my 5. That's your 5. The honourable mention, we've had Patrick on a couple of times. I have to mention Almost Educate. They ramble all over the place with a lot of politics.
Nothing wrong with that.
A lot of politics, a lot of alternate history, a lot of other stuff, but Patrick and Dennis are always entertaining. I think is it time to hang up our bats?
I pretty much think so. I think we probably just need to say some thank yous.
We need to say a lot of thank yous, but we might not be able to mention everyone by name, but yes.
Well, maybe not, no. But I think we just need to say thank you to everybody who's tweeted us, emailed us, Facebooked us, liked us, shared us.
Spoke to us at conventions.
Spoke to us at conventions.
Spoke to us in the pub.
Spoke to us in the pub. Turned up to the pub with us.
Turned up to us at DW Live.
Yeah, several people wrote blog posts supporting us, boosted us into bigger circles.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Everybody who sent us artwork.
Yeah.
So David Wynn, for example, who did badge for us, I believe.
Lee Grice.
Yeah.
Competition entrance, so that's I won't get everyone here, but it's like Peter, Dion, I think again Lee, but anybody who's entered any competitions we've done, thank you.
Can I just give a quick shout out to the people of Scrolls and the Flashback to the Past who put up with us deciding they were our blood rivals in the early days of the show?
No, you cannot. You cannot give them thanks.
Well, I'm going to. We have
crushed them underfoot.
And now we pass into the same great beyond that they have.
Yes, but after we have crushed them underfoot, driven them before us,
we're coming for your kids,
and heard the lamentations of their women. So we are victorious.
So there's that.
We are surrounded by their cakes as our boat is shoved off into the fjord, and the flaming arrow is fired into it.
Good times.
Which is very bad history, but anyway, we won't get there. And you mentioned everybody who's guested, I take it?
Everybody who's guested. Honestly, there's been too many of you.
There's everybody who's fed back.
I think we have tried at various points to thank everyone personally who ran into you at cons. So hopefully that counts. I apologise. I'm not going to reel off a list of names because that would take forever.
The Facebook group.
But we love you all.
Facebook group, the Twitter people.
Yeah, Twitter people. All the Geek Syndicate people. Barry and Dave especially for letting us on their feed.
Yes.
Everybody who everyone has given us audio advice for terrible audio, which has almost certainly come back in this episode.
Yes.
It
will be choppy.
It will be choppy.
Yes.
I think we should probably thank our better halves for putting up with it.
Well.
And occasionally passing me little notes.
Well, mine doesn't pass me little
notes.
Mine
occasionally Googles things for me and passes me little notes, but she's gone upstairs now, so I can be thinking about it.
Mine does, but mine might be getting a sizable thank you for Christmas this year.
Well,
don't worry, there'll be none of that. It's a spa weekend. Don't worry.
Right. What else? Just everybody, thanks for listening. I think that's
anybody who's considered being a guest, but for some reason we haven't got round to sourcing it out.
Everybody we talked to about coming on the show.
The novelists, the martial artists, the sundry others.
Yes.
But in the live event you're listening, our apologies. But thank you for being so receptive. And I think we better, we need to put on these brown coats, doff these flat caps, pick up these brooms, and
head off into the sunset.
Brush these last bits of refuse out into the street. Make sure the lights are turned off. There's no spare change left in the bottom of the gas meter, and hand over the keys to the landlord. Yeah. 7 years.
Yeah.
It's a good thing we knew each other before, or this would be quite emotional.
Nah.
Yeah. I'll see you tomorrow for Flash and Blades, yeah.
Oh yeah, I should do. I need to work on my character. I need to work out how my character can have a affair with myself.
Yeah. No, I think that's quite easy. But anyway.
Role playing, eh?
Yes. Right. So, I think the last thank you, dickhead. So yeah, I managed to insult Matt at the end. He's got to get that in.
So yeah, and just a quick thank you for listening.
Well, no, fuck up, no, bollocks to that. Thank you to you for listening, dear listeners.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for Matt for putting up with my petty insults, ringmastering and general. You need to know this now. Over the last 7 years. If we didn't do it now, we wouldn't have done it at all. Yeah.
We're gonna have to go now, or else we're just gonna be here for another hour.
Yeah. Well, and then another hour it'll end up with I love you. Oh, we've been there. So take care. All the best. Make sure you don't tip the doorman on your way out. And thank you for listening. And should our paths cross one kind of a convention or another or real life in the future, please let on. And take care. Mind how you go.
Good night.
We value feedback, corrections and your opinions. Either email us at dissectingworlds@yahoo.co.uk or follow us on Twitter. Details are on the show notes.